throw your running shoes out.
Okay, you kick us off and you just lead it because I don't know where you're going with this.
So yeah, Aaron said this a few times, and I want to know where it's going to. But he says throw your running shoes.
Just throw your running shoes out the door. Into the garbage as far away as you possibly can.
I cannot wait to argue this.
Let's get into this because I think that like a lot of, obviously there's been a mantra for a long time, more mileage, just run more, do more. But how does that cross over, and is this really helping people? Or, like if you enjoy running, fucking run your heart out. But is it
right? Yeah.
Is it helping you get to where you want to go?
Yeah, because we're only here to talk about improvements, SPP in your job.
Right. So, performance.
It's performance.
Throw your running shoes out.
Throw your running shoes out.
Let's hear it.
All right. So, from a lot of surveys we've taken, we found that speed and power and agility work is the most used, most needed for law enforcement. There's been studies come out that show that more so that the reps that you get in running decrease your ability to sprint. Two different movement patterns. One is low stride, low knee level. Your foot strike's completely different depending on how you're taught how to run properly. Your upright versus a sprint, it's high knee drive. A lot of force being put in the ground, and you're leaning forward, mostly on the acceleration. Then you do get up with your hips underneath you, but very different movement patterns involved with that. A 10-minute jog, I don't know. I don't run all the time, so I couldn't tell you exactly how many strides you're getting in a 10-minute jog versus a sprint, a 15-yard sprint. If you're really, really fast, it's going to be like 5-6 steps maybe. You can't sprint enough to counteract the amount of reps you're getting from a jog.
And a rep is like a knee drive, essentially.
A knee drive or a foot strike.
Foot strike.
Okay. Yeah, foot contact. Yeah.
So you're still propelling yourself in both things.
Yeah.
But we are not the same, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like running or jogging or running for distance is not the same as sprinting, is what you're saying. And from a performance output or perspective, you're going to get more out of the sprinting at a couple of different levels than you're going to get out of the distance running or long, what people consider, we talked about this in another podcast.
Everyone's like long is different.
Long
That's
sprint,
what she said.
Long sprint, right? It's very different, and maybe people don't understand why. So let's go into this a little deeper.
So if you're trying to get faster, the only way to do that is to sprint and sprint fast. Jogging, obviously, you're not going fast. And so you need to accumulate a lot of sprint reps to be able to improve that skill. Because sprinting in itself is a skill. Yeah, it is a semi-brute force involvement. Like you can just push really, really hard and flail everywhere. But if you want to be efficient, you got to work on it as a skill. And so you need to spend time in that skill.
Okay, how do you organize this? Or do you want to debate this before we get into this?
I don't know, just let him keep talking.
Yeah. So how do you organize this? How do you organize your sprint program?
So we do 2 days typically during the week. 1 day is acceleration. So your short sprints, 10 to 15 yards is how I do it. And then we go with a max velocity day. So anything over 15 yards. So typically it's the 20, 30, 40 yard range. And that's just because most people can't hold a sprint for that long and really good technique.
Okay, so there's two things there. One, they can't maintain technique. And two, they just don't have the conditioning level in order to be able to do it that would help them obviously maintain the technique. So
unless they've been sprinting since high school and they've maintained it all the way out through their career, which is very, very rare, they're not going to be able to hold that sprint taking that max velocity, which is what a sprint is considered, is a max effort sprint or max effort bout. They're not going to be able to hold it for very long.
Yeah, so we're talking a couple of seconds.
Yeah. 2, 3, 4, something like that.
Right, so people think like I got to sprint like 100 meters.
We talked about that, how like 40 meters is not a sprint.
Not anymore.
Not for me.
It stops being a sprint. Like you are not an Olympic track athlete. Like
okay, so throwing out my running shoes. Obviously, I disagree with that because I'm missing out on my ability to improve aerobically from running. So I don't think you're giving me a black and white of like legitimately throw out my running shoes.
Right.
Because I like to sprint my running shoes too. So screw you, Aaron. But so what are your recommendations for like, if I want to get better at sprinting, are you saying, hey, I don't want you to do anything in the aerobic arena?
Great question. Yeah. So you can do running, lower intensity running. It just needs to be at 75% or higher. So anything below 75% of your max speed is where it starts dipping into your knee drive isn't quite as good enough for your technique to be reinforced. So you can do tempo runs at 75%. You do 16 100-meter tempo runs and be able to hold that 75%. accumulating a mile. Or you can hop over to, you have something?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
He doesn't.
No, I have
He
questions.
does.
I have questions.
Yeah. Other options are what you do with your mono work.
Okay, that was my question. It was like, if I want to improve my aerobic capacity and you're like, I don't really want you to run long distance, like how do I improve?
Counterintuitive.
Yeah, how do I improve my aerobic base?
Yeah. Bike, ski, swim, row.
Yeah, swim's good.
Yeah. Elliptical.
He was talking about the longer, lower aerobic base, like zone 2 type training.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a different type of conversation outside of sprinting. But where are you going with this?
So like how detrimental, I want to improve my sprinting. How detrimental is it for me to actually go to a track and go run a 5K? I ran a 5K the other day. How much did I screw my sprinting capability?
That is individually based. So if you're really good at sprinting and you have the ability to sprint and you've been training it consistently, it's not going to be as detrimental as you're just now learning to sprint. And so it's kind of like you're trying to get really good at the 1 rep max on your snatch. And so you're training to peak for an Olympic competition or get your 1 rep max snatch up. And then as you're learning those skills, you're over there doing muscle snatches or snatches for time.
Be careful. Be careful.
I
You're in my arena, and I agree with you here.
Yeah.
I think what you mean to say isn't muscle snatches. It's actually more like, hey, I'm in a workout for time, the last thing you said, where I'm going to do 30 for time now, isn't going to transfer over to 1. Muscle snatches are good. Don't put them down.
Hey,
but okay, that makes more sense to me. So you're saying it's not super detrimental.
It's not super detrimental unless you're a rookie and you're not experienced enough to be able to separate the two in your mind and physically separate them.
When you actually told me this, I'll agree with you now. But when you told me this in the beginning, this is a while ago, but you were like, hey, if I'm trying to improve at sprinting, I shouldn't just be running. You might have said jogging to me, it didn't really matter. It comes down to your knees and that whole yards. It didn't cross my mind. Like, I didn't think like that. Like, oh, those are actually 2 different movements. Because I kind of equate them to be like, I'm running. It's a movement, right? It doesn't matter if I'm going fast, slow, or walking. Well, walking. But it didn't really cross my mind. So it was actually enlightening to me to be like, oh, you're right. Those are 2 different movements.
And they need to be practiced
separately.
And so you asked the question about the being detrimental. My question would be like, well, it depends on your goal.
That's exactly how I was wanting to kind of tie this thing up.
If you're, it's not detrimental to maybe improving your cardiorespiratory capacity, right? But it could be detrimental in terms of improving your sprint speed if there's more emphasis being put there because of the difference in the mechanics, but also how we're managing your program specific to recovery and the contacts that we're trying to get through the week in terms of load management, right? And intensity and volume of what we're trying to do. And I think that's where people get lost. They feel like they have to run to stay in shape and they don't recognize the cardiorespiratory and capacity benefits they can get from doing a well put together sprint program or speed program. And that they'd be surprised if they followed through on a program, maybe didn't try to program hop or panic because they're not getting enough mileage in. If they stuck with the program and then went back out and did their 5K, they might realize you're actually probably going to be faster, right, at your 5K because your leg turnover, your power transfer, all that stuff is going to improve. And there's transference from that to the 5K, but not the 5K back to the sprint. Agreed or disagreed?
Absolutely agree. I actually listened to a talk from one of the coaches at University of Oregon who actually mentioned that exact thing. He had a athlete who did only sprint work for him in their strength and conditioning sessions. The athlete was in ROTC, and so he had to go run at some point. He hadn't ran. He had only done sprint sessions for like 2 to 3 months and then retested this run. He comes back, he goes, hey coach, I dropped my time by, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was a significant amount of time. I want to say 2 minutes. And he was like, sure, yeah, no crap. All you've done is actually work on putting force in the ground. So of course it's going to transfer over to how you decrease your time.
Yeah, so just real quick, just on how we've programmed this into our programs. And you mentioned like you could ski, you could bike, you could swim, right, as an alternative to building the cardiorespiratory capacity in terms of training those energy systems that interplay there without beating up your body and or running into the mechanics issues. And going back to like cycling as an example, there's some transference from cycling into running, not necessarily the other way in terms of a leg turnover, but it's not beating you up, right? And again,
a lot lower intensity for sure.
That's definitely a conversation, a different topic we'll have though, is the idea of which we'll talk in a different conversation, is why I program machine work and not as much running.
Yep.
Because I believe wholeheartedly that I'm not shoving my foot in the ground over and over. If he's having me do it a bunch of times and it's a forced drive, like I am driving my foot into the ground, why do I want you to do more of it?
Right.
Yeah.
Like I want you to do some other things that are still beneficial to hear, but it's not like I'm doing the same movement over and over again.
Yeah, good talk for another time. I think at the end of the day, like the title of this talk could be a little clickbaity, throw your running shoes away. But the reality of it is if you're trying to get better at sprinting, think less about your distance and don't worry about your mileage. I think the more run more mileage, that whole saying needs to die in a fiery bus crash. Like it just needs to go away because it's beating people up and people aren't actually improving their performance. So check out the speed and power program that we put together and the sprint work that's there. But if you really want sprint work, you'll also find it in the strength program.
Every program.
Movement is in every single program I do. It's a staple.
So
Just not the emphasis.
You're always doing a little bit of it because it's going to be part of the job description at some point, and you want to be ready when it comes time to ready. But if you're really trying to improve that, the speed and power program is where you can improve it maybe prior to jumping into the performance program.
Right.